Aloha shifters, this is Brendan and doing a little quick documentation to share with you guys. Today is going to be my first float tank experience. So the isolation deprivation where you go and you're like sitting in the salt water and you're floating, and it's sort of creating this experience of being suspended without just like the limitations of the body. So when the body's floating, you can really let yourself get into the mind, and this is meant to be like a mental practice and a meditation. And it's also just supposed to be relaxing. So a lot of people have talked great things about this, and for myself being really interested in like the capabilities of the mind and like astral projection and lucid dreaming and what happens when we close our eyes and go into that inner space, I'm looking forward to being able to share it with you. And stay tuned, this is the before, and the after will be coming at you in 1 second. Much love. Okay, so we're still before, and here I am at the float tank here in Float Toronto. So just give you a quick tour. This is like what you go inside of. I haven't been inside of it just yet, but obviously it's salt water, so you'll be floating. Try not to bounce off the edges. Create the whole like suspended body floating sensation. So yeah, I'm just gonna get right into it, but just kind of showing you guys that this is like the the like time machine that I'm gonna be stepping into, the space-time machine. So all right, see you guys on the other side. Intentions going in, just to let go and yeah, be mindful. Flex the astral capabilities. Okay, so here we are. This is my journal, thought, reflection, consciousness documentation after getting out of the float tank experience, and I'm not alone. There is another human here with me, and this is Kat,
hey,
and she's actually the person who like gifted me this float tank experience, and she's done this a couple times herself. So in terms of like what it was, like what I got out of it, what like you got out of it and stuff too, like I would definitely say that like I'm really happy that the float tanks exist, that like something like this exists, because it's really cool, because other people are coming here and you can tell that it's like playing an important part within their own awakening processes, because it's very rare for us to sort of go into that place of complete stillness. But when we do, you know, we sort of like allow ourselves to disassociate from the body and not only sort of reevaluate what our connection with the mind is, but also sort of like be shown what it is that we need to see, sort of thing. So Kat, what, it was your third time doing it? What did you think?
No, this is my fourth time.
Fourth time?
Yeah, lucky number 4. Every time is entirely different. You can never really go into it expecting a similar experience. Of course, on a surface level, there's a lot of similarities in between what happens and what you feel within your body, like just the sheer novelty of being buoyant and the nice feeling of relaxing into it. But yeah, this is extremely beneficial. I really enjoy what purpose it brings. For me, it helps me a lot with my anxiety and any muscle tension that I carry within my lower back after doing training. I think it's great because it's attracting a lot of people from different realms of life. You got athletes who have no experience in this type of thing. They're seeking it out as a form of therapy. You have, you know, psychonauts and lucid dreamers and people who are into like, you know, spirituality. It's just a thing that's so extremely cool, and I'm really excited to see what it develops into. For me personally, like I said, every time has been different so far. This time in particular, I found myself, I was able to relax a lot smoother, and then once I got to that state where I was fully relaxed, I noticed that I started to lose a sense of who I was in terms of my bodily space, and spatial awareness was a very interesting and tricky thing to define into words right now, but I felt as though my body fused with the water to such a degree that my body was no longer in the water, but I was floating above it, and I wasn't even a body anymore. I was just pure consciousness. So, yeah, it was really, really cool.
That's cool.
I'm excited to see what's going to happen when you continue to do it, because I'm sure this won't be your first time, your only time.
Yeah, like, I mean, for this time going into it. So again, as people go into it, there's a whole experience of, yes, like you're floating, like the salt in the tank, you're literally floating, and as long as you're not bouncing off the edges, like it feels like as if you're like in space, or like in, like, a lot of people associate with like being back in the womb, in a lot of ways. So I mean, for me, kind of like there's a lot of stuff that I was like kind of playing around with my thoughts, practicing visualization, practicing kind of doing things similar to what we would do with the journey meditations, like imagining myself like in a forest, and like even doing some like martial arts stuff in a forest, and like practicing like flying, and just like sort of seeing what that feels like, but then at the same time like really going into that stillness with the attempt of like kind of not to fall asleep, but in that state where the body goes to sleep but the mind stays awake, and then you sort of get this astral projection, astral travel experience beginning to rise up to the surface. One of the things, I was even working with like time traveling. I was kind of like, because it was really a space for me to think about like, okay, I want to be listening to what the universe has to show me within this stillness, within this silence. So I sort of put out the question of just like show me a bit about my past lives, and then kind of go into that stillness and observe that, like, how much me being in that stillness allowed that information to come through, because there's a difference between listening and still sort of actively using your imagination. It's a very subtle difference. So the one thing that I did notice out of this is that I sort of had like this philosophical thought process of like, without the body. So in this case, without the body, without the association of the body, you become the mind, and you're in the mind. But then the next step is like, without the mind, what do you become beyond that? And like for me, that was a really interesting idea, because it's this idea of like you become the listener, and then you realize that even though you let go of the mind, there's still a voice, there's still something else talking, and that is like the consciousness. And then for me, what I really got out of this is that realization that you are the voice in the void, which is like something that I've actually sort of like said to myself, and I never really fully understood it. I mean, I know what it meant, but now it sort of means something even more. Like, yeah, like you literally, you are, without the mind, you see a screen, and then there's like something projecting onto the screen, and you are both the viewer, but you can also be the projector when you're actively using the mind. But when you're not using the active mind as a projector, there's still something else projecting. What is that other thing projecting? It's like the higher parts of yourself, and again, it's the voice in the void, as if I can refer to it as anything. But essentially, that's still you. It's so a float sensory deprivation tank, when it allows us to remove the association with the body, allows us to get into a recalibration of our connection with the mind, but also a connection with the heart. And even just like in there, I was like having my hands on my heart during the meditation, connecting in that way, but really working on getting into the stillness to sort of like have those moments. But this is my first time, so like I think going back, it'll allow me to experience a little bit more. But yeah, Kat, what else do you want to share with the people?
Just there's such an array of benefits when it comes to this stuff. Like I've pointed out before, for me, anxiety is a big thing, and it kind of fluctuates within my life depending on what I'm going through and circumstances and stuff like that. We get so lost in this continuum of thought that when we're finally alone with ourselves, truly alone, without any distractions, without any sensory stimuli, it brings about such a richer experience of who we are as conscious beings, and to be reminded of that is so important. So for me, it's like this really nice reset button. It allows me to remember who I am with everything else stripped away, and that can be daunting at times. I mean, to be honest, there's been times where I was in the tank and it did feel a little bit scary, but you learn to just keep relaxing and challenging yourself to face that darkness, because within that darkness there is so much light, there is so much awareness, and like you were saying, you do become this observer. You're no longer being tagged along into the experience, but rather you have this choice of like how much attention and how much control. It's hard to explain, but there's like a loss of control, there's a surrender within all of that. Yeah. I probably have so much more, but super relaxed. Right?
Hell is still a lot like to think about and stuff. it's interesting because again, like when you sort of get into that stillness, you notice the difference between your projected thoughts and your received thoughts, and to me that's really interesting. When you're lying there and you're just like, all right, stillness, 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 and then like a single phrase will pop into your mind, and you'll just
Yeah.
be like, ooh, like like I didn't say that. Again, like my mind voice didn't say that, but you still heard it, sort
You
of
just
thing.
reminded me actually of what I wanted to say with that.
Go ahead.
Towards
Yeah.
the end of the tank, so you have the choice of having music playing in the first 15 minutes of the tank, and then once it stops and you're doing an hour session, the rest of the 45 minutes is just complete silence. So how they signify that the session is over is that they play music. And I remember really feeling like I was very present in the moment, to the point where my body was no longer my body, the water was no longer water. And a thought popped into my head where I was like, I don't want this to end. And I'm pretty sure, based off of my time perception, that this will soon end. And so I was preparing myself for it to finish. And I noticed the immediate feeling within my body that was triggered when I was like, oh God, it's going to be over. And for me to have like such an acute awareness of that feeling and that sensation, it almost felt like it was bordering on anxiety, but not such an intense degree of it. But being able to have so much space between thoughts and your reactions to thoughts is complete freedom. And yeah, it's like when you see a film reel, and when it's sped up at real time, like, you can't really see the individual fragments of that shot. So being able to see your thoughts in that dynamic, in that way, is powerful and profound. And yeah, that's how it was for me. I was like, I caught this reaction within my body, but I can choose whether or not I'm going to react to it in such a way that's automatic, or I can slow it down completely and tweak my experience and navigate my world throughout all of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and like for me, that brings like more meaning to the word mindfulness. Like when you're literally in a deprivation tank, like it is pure mindfulness. You're full of mind. Like when you can let go of the body, it is nothing but mind. But then again, it's like defining what our relationship is with mind. Mind isn't just like the thoughts, but mind is sort of like this mechanical receiver of thoughts. It produces thoughts and it receives thoughts outside of our own. One thing just sort of end on that I think is really beneficial is that kind of playing on what Kat's saying, we sort of get into that space and we're just like this is so blissful, this is so amazing, this is so psychedelic, and it is a very psychedelic sense, not just in the sense of entheogens, but in the sense of connecting with like the godness, the delos within ourselves, within the psyche. And what I sort of got out of it is that like, what is the tank teaching us? It's teaching us about stillness. And so, I mean, ultimately, like what we love out of this is, yes, the floating sensations, the dissociation with the body, but it's really that stillness. And that stillness is something that we can bring into sitting on a bed and doing meditation, lying on a bed and doing meditation. Like it might be a little bit different, but like ultimately it's still very similar. So like for me, now that I've experienced that sensation of the float tank, since that was my first time, I mean, I've floated in a pool before, but not quite like that. That for me is sort of like allows me to like archive this experience, and then I can recall it simply by now, like closing my eyes and thinking back to that memory and bringing it forward as like coding for this present experience. So like that's kind of the cool thing, is that like the float tank experience can stay with you if you sort of carry it with that idea of it just being an internal mechanism. So really for me it's just like it was cool, it was awesome, but equally being able to continue the stillness found through regular meditation, I think can still get us to that same place. And so like the journey is far from over, sort of thing. So yeah. So Kat, was there anything else, final notes or message for all the other dreamers out there?
We'll all float on okay.
Float on, dream on. So yeah, final message, thank you to Float Toronto for hosting this amazing space, and
Big
go
ups to
check out Float Tank place where you are and experience it for yourself, and just keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep being the question, live the question, and the universe has plenty to show you. So on behalf of Kat and myself, Brendan, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the future. Keep it shifty. One love.
Wee you.